program tonight. We're going to limit everyone to 10 minutes, basically speaking, open it to questions, and then later on, the Montgomery County Taxpayers League will do a presentation. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Hughes, who was appointed Director of the Office of Management and Budget in August 2011 by the County Executive. Mrs. Hughes is responsible for advising the County Executive and County Council on resource allocation and fiscal planning for the county's operating budget and the 6-year public services program, as well as the capital budget and the 6-year capital improvement program known as the CIP. Last over there is Alex Espinosa. He's now the Director of Finance Department, which manages fiscal operations, recommends and implements sound fiscal policies, safeguards public assets, and encourages a safe environment on public property. He succeeded Joe Beach, who used to be at these meetings for I don't know how many years. And without any further ado, I will let Nancy Floreen speak.
Thanks, Jerry. Well, first of all, thank you all for letting me join you tonight. This is my last hurrah. This will be my 16th year of working on the budget of the County Council, and I'm the only one not running for office. But that's never held me back from saying what I really thought. As you may or may not know, I guess I'll focus on the budget, right, Jerry? They sent over to us a budget. It's 5.56 billion. Is that the number? I said over the way it works, and it's a little weird in the state of Maryland. Under the charter, the county executive has to issue his operating budget on his or her operating budget on March 15th. The weird thing about that is it's before the General Assembly closes. I think it's tonight. So they don't really know all the ins and outs of what's going to be coming from the state in terms of revenue when they issue their budget. So it's their best guess. So what happens is after the county executive sends over his budget, they've already sent over some adjustments, I think, certainly to the capital improvements budget that came out in the middle of January, which is also required to be issued then. And we are about to commence public hearings on that. Mr. Greenberg, I look forward to your public testimony within the next 5 public hearings of all the waste and abuse and public spending that we've never heard you speak to in the past. And I'm very glad that we have all these candidates here because you should know running for office is the easy part. The hard part is actually doing the work. The way we in Montgomery County, the council has a tremendous authority. And so we view, and Jennifer won't like this, but I view their budget that comes out every year, the middle of March, as an interesting first draft. We can add, we can subtract. We are the ones who set the tax rate. Love us or hate us, that's what we do. We increase fees, we decrease fees, we find things to add to the budget, we find things to reduce from the budget. We rarely do reduce. I will tell you, I can guarantee you, that we will hear from, I don't know, do you know how many people are signed up to speak, Marlene? About 150? About 150 people are going to speak at our public hearings, and I can guarantee you, are you going to speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We got one guy who's going to say, what are you smoking? Why are you spending all this money? And everyone else is going to say, spend more money. At least for me. They're not going to really say, don't spend it over there. But they're going to say, my project is really critically important, and you need to fund it. This year, ICE has fully funded the school's request. So we'll see if we get a lot of demands for extra dollars in that department. Probably, we usually do. And everyone who has a pet project, the climate action people, I don't know, whatever group that you are part of as an advocacy group, it takes money for us to address your needs, to focus on those kinds of issues. And we have very good staff who work in the implementation shop, which is the county executive's office. They do a hell of a job, if you ask me. But they're expensive, and that is what government is all about. Government is basically 90%, 80% compensation. MCPS is 90%. That's the challenge of the world we live in. It's all about the people who do the work. Even Neil, who works for us and is a candidate, see, all the people who work for the county government are not inexpensive people. We pay a decent wage. We pay decent retirement benefits. We provide decent health benefits. That's incredibly expensive. We also are a pretty caring place, so we put a lot into health care for the uninsured here in Montgomery County. We put a lot, I don't think we put enough into the other kinds of things like transportation and the like, but by and large, Health and Human Services eats up a big chunk of the budget, and I predict that we will certainly fully fund what's been proposed and probably add some more. Usually the budget that comes out of the county council, the way it works is we'll have these public hearings over tomorrow night, Wednesday afternoon and evening, and Thursday afternoon and evening. I've told you how it's going to go. You can follow along. Maybe some of you will testify. Now, if you are a candidate, raise your hands, candidates, all of you. Okay, most people in this room are candidates. For Pete's sake, watch it. No, I'm serious, because people have no idea, if you ask me, of the needs in Montgomery County. This is a group of pretty privileged people. You've got time to come to a public meeting. You do not reflect Montgomery County. Our poverty is significant. We've got a fair number of wealthy people, but we have a huge number of people on the other end of the spectrum. They're expensive, they have expensive needs that we have an obligation to address. And that is a fact. You don't see all of that at our public hearings, but I would urge you to follow along and watch, see who shows up. I don't think we're going to have a big, rich versus poor kind of sets of public hearings. Periodically, we do have that. I don't think that's really going to be reflected in this public hearings on the budget, but you should know. We are not your father's Montgomery County. We are not the Montgomery County I moved to in 1980, or many of you have come to, grown up in. It is very different, and it's a very interesting place. And we're not going to hear from the people who really need us. We're going to hear from the regular suspects, I will tell you now. That's one of our challenges, because we got to worry. At least I've always viewed my job as worrying about the people not in the room. That involves the people who have to pay the taxes. That involves the people who we need to serve. That's the people who would expect us to do the right thing. I will tell you, based on my time in the county council, you should feel pretty good about this place. We are very thoughtful about what we do. Now, I don't know how many of you have actually followed along in our budget work. Probably none of you. You all have a point of view about whatever niche issue that you care about. But I doubt very seriously that you've ever read any of the analyst packets that we get for all the agency work that we review. It is very, very thorough. We start today on park and planning. And if you want to see detail, you want to see care, you want to see attention to policy objectives, you will see it in the work that we do. Now, bless the county executive. Their budget, you've got a copy of it, I saw Jerry. Let me wave it. It's very heavy. It's very heavy. This is sort of a marketing document. This tells you what's in the budget. Our staff analysis will tell you what's not in the budget, what should have been in the budget, what doesn't need to be in the budget. How it compares to how we spent money in the past, what the future needs are, and whether it raises the kinds of issues that you want us to raise. Are we paying attention to the policy issues that people want us to pay attention to? It's very thorough work. Our people on the council staff side knock themselves up, which is why it's hard for us to do anything else during the budget session, because all of the council staff are working and reviewing the budgets that they do policy work for in the rest of the year. So that's really how the county council is going to be operating from now until May. The puff of white smoke comes up, May 28th, 27th? 24th this year. That's when we will approve the final budget. We will not be increasing property taxes by any means. The way it works under the charter limit is that we are basically, I view sort of the county budget as sort of, it's like an ocean of money that comes in, and then an ocean goes out. Waves come in and comes in. It's not like it all comes in at the same moment in time, or the dollars go out at the same moment in time. I don't know if you think about it that way, Jennifer, or not, but that's how I think about it. And anyways, we will, it's a very big budget, but under the charter requirements, if basically our expenditures, revenues, cannot exceed those that we received from the previous year, plus the cost of, basically cost of inflation. The challenge is that people get reassessed in the course of the year. We have new construction that comes online in the course of the year. And so actually what we do mostly, and I'm sure we'll do it this year, what's proposed, I think we reduced the tax rate by 2 cents, something like that. Your property tax bill may go up a tad nonetheless because your property has become a tad more valuable. But overall, we will not exceed the limits in the charter. I can assure you that. I have performed Neil's function for many years in the council saying, no, we don't need to exceed the charter limit. I don't think that's a bad thing. But we have incredible needs, particularly in the school system. No one ever thought that we'd be seeing 2,500 new kids every year. No one ever thought that to be the case. And that's what's really killing this budget and killing the school system in terms of the demands on the budget. So they're getting funded at the level that the Board of Ed has requested, and everyone else is getting a little bit of a haircut. And we'll see how it comes out in the wash. Meetings are already beginning on the details. And so, like I said, if you want to see care and attention to all this stuff, I do urge you to follow along. And there's nothing that makes me crazier than when some of you candidates go around saying, oh, there's all this abuse and waste. And I have never heard a single peep from folks on that point in the course of public hearings or in the course of our work. We do nothing but respond to constituents. We spend a lot of time listening to people and trying to make sure that their comments are addressed. Oftentimes they're not fully, folks are not fully aware of the facts, but lots of times if someone raises a good point, you can bet your bottom dollar we follow through on that. So don't be shy, but also don't throw stones if you haven't done your homework. So with that, Jerry?
We thank you very much. Marlene Michadelson to stand up. She was appointed the Executive Director of the Council by the Council, succeeding good friend Steve Farber on February 1st, 2018. Prior to that, she was the Council's Senior Analyst on Land Use Issues. She decided she doesn't want to speak tonight. And now I'm going to introduce Alex Espinosa, who's the Director of the Department of Finance. And we will take questions after these people will speak.
Okay, thank you. So the Department of Finance's role in the budget process is fairly straightforward, so I'll keep my comments brief and turn it over to Jennifer, who I'm sure has a lot more to say. When we started off the process, I think it's fair to say we expected it to turn out a little bit differently than it actually did. We were expecting a little bit, budgets are never easy, putting them together, but we probably did expect an easier time this year with the way the economy was going. Positive economic indicators, stock market growth, etc. But that didn't turn out to be the case, and certainly when you have revenue constraints, it makes everything a lot tougher. A lot of the decisions become a lot more difficult to make at that point in time. So when we gave the council an update back in December, we had just received our November income tax distribution from the state, which is comprised of the third quarter distribution of income tax revenues from regular wage income, but also as a final reconciliation of the prior tax year's tax returns. And in that distribution, we saw a significant decline from the previous year. And in discussions with the state controller, that decline was attributed to a change in taxpayer behavior. This would have been tax year 2016, change in taxpayer behavior, potentially anticipating federal tax reform, which ultimately occurred at the end of calendar year 2017. Our decline in income tax revenues, or at least a reduction from our prior estimate, was about $78 million for FY18, and another approximately $50 million for FY19. So the combination of the two and our other sources of revenue over the 2 fiscal years had an impact of about $170 million from our fiscal plan. So in reaction to that, the county executive did propose a savings plan shortly thereafter, which the council ultimately approved at the end of January to help trim those shortfalls and set the stage for the recommended budget in March. Now, our updated forecast in March was essentially consistent with our fall update, not much of a deviation at all from our prior estimates, and consistent with our expectations. So that set the stage for the executive's recommended budget in March. I would just say, in general, given the tax reform and things going on at the state and federal level, I think we can expect a fair amount of instability, unpredictability, and potential volatility in our revenues, especially with income taxes over the next 1 to 2 years at least. There are a lot of different provisions in the federal bill impacting states like Maryland, states with relatively high income tax rates, and also with dependency on a population of very high income earners, which we are. Just one little factoid which we discussed with council in our December update, which we saw as an impact to our local income tax revenues. Just looking at the top 50 taxpayers in Montgomery County, we saw a decline of about $600 million in reported realized capital gains. So, just from a very small number of taxpayers in the county can have a significant impact on our county revenues. So with that, I think turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you. I don't think I need them. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I think that's right. So if at any point you need me to speak up, just raise your hand. Ms. Floreen is absolutely correct. The executive...
Remember that.
On this one particular point, the executive transmitted a budget on March 15th that totaled about $5.56 billion. The total tax-supported amount, which is what you all pay for through your property taxes and your income tax revenue that we received, totaled about $4.8 million, or $4.87 billion, not million, dollars. What Ms. Floreen did not say was that the only ones that really took a haircut in there was county government. Schools went up by about 3%. Montgomery College went up by nearly 1%. Park and Planning went up by nearly 1%. And the biggest increases in the budget are actually in 2 categories. Our debt service payments, which help fund the CIP, which went up a whopping 5% approximately, and the payments that we made to our retiree retiree health insurance fund, which is actually required through an accounting requirement from the federal government. So some of the biggest increases are in fact in the uncontrollables in our budget. Did you want to hold the question? Or?
No, maybe I misheard.
Okay.
What was the increase in the retirement costs?
In the retiree health
Percentage.
insurance?
Yes.
Yeah, percentage-wise.
I'm sorry, it's 5.4%.
Okay, thank you.
So Everything else was either held pretty steady, or in the case of the school system, they did get a 3% increase, but most of it was attributable to the increase in enrollment. So what this budget really signifies is very much a steady hand budget, which frankly has been the hallmark of the budgets that Mr. Leggett has had to deal with over the last 11 to 12 years that he has been in office. I did provide some handouts. They are online if you were one of the lucky ones that did not get it. But in fact, I did just want to mention our entire budget is online. It is in downloadable form so that you can play with the numbers all you want. There's historical data in there so you can do historical comparisons. Ours is the most transparent and the most open budget that I know of, certainly more open and transparent than MCPS, which has very little online, but even more so than the college, which has nothing online. So again, you can play with our numbers and play with our budget to your heart's content. I did want to say that, yes, indeed, the executive proposes and the council disposes. And what Mr. Leggett has said nearly every year that he has been in office, that I have heard him, when he transmits the budget to the county council, is you are the ones who actually are the final appropriating authority. He knows that. He was a council member for 4 terms himself. But please, stay within the general parameters of my operating budget. He has, when we send over a budget, we send over a balanced budget with our best estimate on what the revenues are, as Mr. Espinosa talked about, and it is unlikely that those revenues will change significantly. So if you add a lot to the budget, there are some potential issues. I would also note that in formulating the budget on the executive side, there is an incredible amount of care and work that goes into it. I have a staff of analysts. I have worked very hard over the last few years to emphasize the need to, in fact, have good analysis that backs up what the executive is sending over to the council. I have freed up their time by creating an incredible budget system that has freed them from incredible amounts of data entry work so that they actually have the time to do the analysis, and they do that work. And the executive, he does his deliberations, as all executives do, internal to the executive branch. The council, by law and by charter, is required to do their deliberations in open session, and so you are able to actually see all of their discussions, which is, as Ms. Floreen said, incredibly useful. Don't worry, we have a very deliberative process internally in the executive branch, and it is a lot of hard work. We start our process on the operating budget in November with an all-call to our departments, and this year we had to tell them we know our revenues are not going to be what we want them to be, so submit a budget that is less than what you had the year before. And they all did that, some more painfully than others, but everybody did that. We asked for cooperation from the outside agencies, the school system and the college and park and planning. That's obviously, they have their own constituency and their own boards that are either elected or appointed, and they are not beholden to the executive to, in fact, follow those instructions, and indeed none of them did. The executive, though, makes his choices and attempts to be very fair, and I think that's why you'll see that the outside agencies did not get the haircut that county government did. That has happened year after year, frankly. There's a chart that I have given you, which I have rolled into oblivion, but it's the one that's titled Controlling County Government Spending. And you will see from this chart that in the years prior to Mr. Leggett taking office, there were double-digit increases in the expenditures that were both proposed and approved by for the operating budget. When he came in, we came in right as the recession was hitting. And in fact, we had declines in the fiscal year 10 and 11, and then modest increases in the following years. So it has been a very, I think, clear effort to control expenditures and to control costs. I've been with Mr. Leggett as he's been county executive since the beginning. From the very beginning, he has made it clear that fiscal stewardship was his paramount goal. And that, I think, really has colored almost all of his decisions. He is over his 12 years or 12 budgets, he's closed over almost $4 billion in estimated shortfalls. And we've done that through a series of very difficult decisions. At the same time that we have done that, we have increased our reserves, which is very important as we go to Wall Street for our rating. And we have maintained a AAA rating throughout this time, and I think we are the county with the longest standing AAA rating. We've had it now, for 37?
I think about 45 years.
Oh, 45 years, which is an amazing accomplishment. And we've done that by, in fact, the fiscal policies that the executive and the council adopted in the depths of the recession, where they committed mutually to achieving a 10% reserve level by the year 2020. The executive has made that his top budget goal, and we are committed to doing that. And I believe, from what I have heard, the council is hopefully as well. It is something that's been very important. He has tried to hold down the property taxes, and in fact, the property tax burden and the total tax burden in the county has dropped in the time that he's been county executive. So while your tax bill may have gone up, in fact, as a percent of total income, it has dropped proportionately. So I can speak to any specifics if you want, but
we're going to ask anyone who has a question to raise their hand, and I will bring the microphone over so everyone can hear the question also, and then take it back after you speak. We're asking any candidates to limit the questions to the budget, not give a campaign speech. Any questions?
Thank you. So I was listening to your general, picture for fiscal health in Montgomery County, and you mentioned, Ms. Floreen, that it's not your mother's, your father's, or grandfather's Montgomery County anymore, and there's quite a bit of poverty. So, given that you have been in the council for many years, could you give your perspective on how it went from being one of the most wealthy and counties to having this high degree of poverty, and what's causing that?
I really can't say for sure. I think the county has grown a great deal, certainly since I moved here in 1980. I think the school system was half the size that it is today. There's been a fair amount of new development throughout Montgomery County. It used to be more of a bedroom community. We have been working on expanding our business tax base, but that is really not a huge priority for the county until the recession hit, I think. And people realized, we really can't assume that we're going to be able to feed off the federal government. both in terms of employment and in terms of federal contracts that Montgomery County had been able to benefit from in the past. Certainly, the wealthy parts of the county have remained wealthy. That has not changed. Certainly, Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Potomacs of the county have only increased in value. I think there's pretty much a regional divide in terms of east and west. And the far eastern part of the county and some of the middle up through Gaithersburg and Germantown have remained more affordable. And that has just evolved naturally. I can't speak to the real, I really don't have any conclusion as to the real reasons why it has changed, but we've always tried to be inclusive. We've always had areas that were less wealthy than other areas. We've always had Langley Park. None of this is new. I think what's happened is that the difference between wealth and less wealth has grown enormously. I don't know about you, but I've got kids looking for homes these days, and just looking at what it costs these days to buy the most modest bungalow you can imagine is, breathtaking. I don't know how many, like you all spend in your first home if you own a home, but I'm sure it's nothing like what young people are looking at today, and that's part of the function of living next to the center of the free world, if you ask me. But that's really not so much a budget issue as an evolution of community issue. I don't have a really great answer for this, other than that the rich have really gotten richer and the poor have not caught up. Certainly population-wise, we've grown, I'd say, geez, since I moved here, I don't know, we've probably grown by at least 300,000 to 400,000 people in Montgomery County generally. Since I first moved here in 1980, 525 back then. Yeah, so we've almost doubled in population. The growth in wealth per se, our overall, and Jennifer might know, or Alex might know better than me, the numbers in terms of the overall wealth of Montgomery County. Certainly our property values have doubled, probably. There's huge wealth here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I think that's the bigger challenge. What's caused that? I think, I think one interesting thing we learned when we were in the recession, and I was council president, so it really hit me really hard. We came to understand that, 25% of the state's capital gains tax came from one zip code in Montgomery County. Or maybe it was 5% of the nation's capital gains tax. We have some really, really wealthy people, bless them, who live in Montgomery County, and they have helped carry the load for many, 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 many years. And that has helped everybody else get along. And I think, what became apparent is that that group has continued to prosper, but it hasn't grown as a group per se. And what has grown is a larger proportion of people of more moderate means. And that has contributed to part of the challenge.
Well,
But that's a whole, that's like a 4-day seminar kind of conversation.
Well, I can't wait, speaking for myself, I can't wait but sink my teeth into some fiscal specifics. And so my question is to the audience looking at this PowerPoint slide. It's a quiz. Tell us what's missing. All these Mr. Ficker, you stole my punchline, Mr. Ficker. Yes, but so that's kind of what we found out looking at the graphic, and it really kind of informs the situation where we get a very positive image. Well, the absence of debt service on this chart is what informs the, well, it's actually the county council's chart, and we asked you guys to change it last year, but you guys didn't.
That's not our chart. mean, they must have made it up.
It says Montgomery County Council.
I've seen that.
They never showed
Well,
it.
maybe it's Hans's chart. Maybe it's Hans's chart.
Jennifer, what is the answer? What is the dollar?
What is the debt
Does-
service? This year we,
429.
yeah, $429 million.
That's a lot of money.
It's budgeted for 2019, or 18.
No, for
That's
2019.
This is last year's budget presentation.
Last year was what,
Well, and it's probably a lot of it's schools. Remember, you gotta remember, we pick up the bill for some of the school construction and, all of that.
Can I get the number again for 2019?
429 million.
429 million. Thank you.
We're going to ask you if you have any specific questions on the budget for numbers, just go online to the
Yeah.
budget.
Hi, my name's Floreen. I'm with the Taxpayers League. I've been asked to provide something of an overview of the budget. I'm going to do that.
Stand in front.
I'm going to do that while I'm standing over on the back of the room.
It doesn't look that good on your chest.
Before I get started, the Taxpayers League is often asked what questions we should ask the politicians. And Joan Fiddler, our president, has prepared those questions after surveying board members of the Taxpayers League, and I think she's going to share it with all of you right now. While she's doing that, I'd like to say that I have about a 10-minute presentation to make, which is a thrill, because normally I'm limited to the 3 minutes that the council allows those of us that provide testimony to speak. And I'm not going to hog those 10 minutes. I really would like a lot of questions. I will be covering the $429 million debt service. I'll be covering a lot of the budget that you never see, like WSSC as well. In fact, just by way of background, the Taxpayers League is interested in efficient and effective government. And our idea is that you get there by linking the budget to performance, and you get performance from good strategies, and you hold managers accountable for results. Makes sense, doesn't it? Well, we don't do those three things. And I'm going to be talking about those three things tonight in terms of the budget. So let me start by talking about the problem. We're going to talk about the problem. We're going to talk about the solution, both from the executive's perspective as well as from the taxpayer league perspective. We're going to provide 3 examples of performance budgeting where you will be able to see specific opportunities to save money. And then we're going to talk about the 2 largest monopolies in the state, WSSC and MCPS. Now, for some of you, it may be surprising to learn that MCPS is a monopoly. But for the poor kids in our county, it's all they get. Unlike Baltimore City, there are no charter schools in Montgomery County. And it's a shame that Baltimore City gets to have all the fun. But we'll be talking about those components, and as I talk, I'll be free and offer as many nuggets as we've been able to unearth from the budget. But please ask questions, provide clarification, and that goes for you, Alex, as well as Jennifer. And Nancy, you can provide some perspective and history, I'm sure, on this as well. Okay, so number 1 problem, spending's excessive and growing. A lot of that is payroll. As Nancy pointed out, we have a lot of people, and they're the largest part of the budget. While inflation is under 3%, we're paying folks well above market pay raises, and over 30% of the pay raises for employees and teachers since the recession have gone up. We have the highest paid employees in the region. That's both sides of the river. That's an astounding number. We offered all of our employees a 5.5% pay raise last year. That includes a general pay raise of 2% plus step increases in longevity. And we plan to do the same again this year. Fortunately, this year, although there are revenue shortfalls, we haven't heard anybody suggest that we have a bare bones budget. Teachers' pay raises are still being negotiated, I believe, so we don't have a number on that yet. Is that? Yes. Okay, so we'll have more on that. Oftentimes, it's right up at the time that the budget has to be approved for MCPS.
We don't have anything to do with the negotiation with the teachers.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, they just.
I'm going to speak to that right now. So oftentimes when Ike has presented the budget to the Taxpayers League, he said, well, geez, the pay raises are kind of excessive, but you know what? The arbitration provisions in the way we do collective bargaining give the unions an edge. Well, in the last few years, Nancy Floreen proposed a change to the way we do arbitration. And unfortunately, that change got defeated in the council. Do you want to add anything to that, Nancy?
Well, I will say, if you're having forums, you could ask the candidates, what are they going to do about this? Because it's very politically incorrect to raise these issues. Actually, when we did the budget the previous year, I think it was a couple years ago, I was council president, and everyone agreed. It was a terrible problem, but push came to shove to actually change the rules in really a non-threatening fashion. The unions got hysterical, and that was the end of that. They never endorsed me anyway, so.
Thank you. All right, the biggest component of the budget is the debt service. What is debt service? It's paying off the principal on loans that we've already received and paying interest on all the debt. $429 million this year, up 5%, as Jennifer noted. And
It's not the biggest component. MCPS, yes.
excluding MCPS, that's correct.
Well, and public safety is the second largest category, if you're interested.
Public safety is,
That's if you're adding agencies together, yes.
Right, which
Right.
is,
next point. Overhead is a big component of the budget. You never hear anybody talk about overhead. What's overhead? Anything that isn't service delivery. In the school system, it's anything that's not instruction. In the school system, it's 45% of every dollar we give the school system. Remember that number, I'm going to come back to it. In the county, it's not as bad, it's only half as bad, it's 20%. And that's a back of the envelope computation because the county doesn't share that publicly.
I mean, if you consider guidance counselors' overhead or
Not
students-
instruction.
Well, I disagree that they are not programmatic employees. I think that that's not really fair. I think that in a school system in the year 2018, that they are critical components of the school system's
We
program.
think so too.
So they're not over.
The only benchmarking we were able to do, we looked at the largest school district in the state of California. Its overhead rate was 30%. So ours is 50% greater.
Yeah, but let's make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And that's very difficult. You've got to understand, jurisdictions across the country handle budgets very, very differently. Everyone across this country are funded in a different way. Different counties have different responsibilities. Many places have school districts that have their own taxing responsibility, and that's handled separately. It's very, very difficult to draw any conclusions. I think we're closest to, what is it in Long Island? Someplace in Long
No,
Island.
Nassau County.
No, there's one, it's either on Long Island or Westchester, one of those we're most comparable to in terms of function and responsibility. But the rest of the world, no, it's very, very different, so just be careful.
I just wanted to say, on Nassau County, each individual town has its own separate school system.
Yeah.
It's not countywide.
And look at those taxes up there, so be glad you're here.
Well, it's just a bit,
Well, this question raises a serious question about why doesn't the school system give as much information on their budget as the Office of Management budget gives on the county budget, excluding the school system. If we had a lot more transparency, we could probably determine what their actual overhead rate is. But their budget, I'm a CPA by trade, I have extreme problems in trying to figure out really where their expenses fall, what type of expenses they are, And if they were required, just for the next increase we want, that you have to just fully publish your usual budget online. That's all you ask for them. Thank you.
All right, let me quickly turn to the second half of the problem.
This is
for the Revenues.
candidates. This is a speech for the candidates.
We've had declining revenues for some years now, and a large part of the revenues are income taxes. They're unstable, and it's difficult to manage these revenues because there's no budget for revenues. There are budgets for expenses, but no budgets for revenues. The largest component of our revenue,
I guess our projections essentially function as resources that are programmed in the budget.
Right. What do you mean there are no budgets for revenue?
We have a 6-year projection of where we expect it to be.
we'd like to see ownership of the revenue projections.
Well, good luck.
I mean, with all due respect, I think our revenue projections are very, very close to the mark. I mean, what are we, we're within 99% generally? And
We've
in
seen
this kind
surprises 3 years running.
Well,
but the
just keep, just,
surprises are on the
I
margin.
mean, I think context is important. I mean, we've got a $5 billion budget, $5 billion worth of revenues. So to see variations, even $100 million, which is a big number, you know, it's a big number to resolve when you're trying to balance a budget. That's still a relatively small number in the overall context of the entire budget. That's 1%.
If you have a better methodology, we're all ears.
Good, let's take it by the numbers. The first component is income taxes. We've missed that for a number of years. The usual reason is that capital gains, a very large component of our income tax receipts, were surprising. The second component, and that's the largest component of the projected shortfall over 6 years. I think that projected shortfall was $417 million. Is that right, Alex?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think I skipped, we may not be matching, is that your, yeah, just if you could, yeah, I might have mixed up 2 slides in
Quite right.
sequence, so if this is all right, yeah, let me
All right,
know
I'm
when
good.
I'm off, okay.
Property taxes.
That's the next slide, hold on, there we go,
Okay.
yeah.
You're way ahead. No, you're good. You're good. Okay. So property tax is a very big component of income tax. It's one that's very visible to all of us because many of us on fixed incomes end up paying property taxes out of a budget that is fixed. And when property taxes increase, we have to make adjustments in our lives. Property taxes, however, in our county are controlled by 2 distinct and dysfunctional processes. One is run by the state. It's the State Department of Assessment and Taxations that does assessments. We're one of 2 states in the nation that do assessments at the state level. Everybody else got smart in the 60s and delegated it to local governments, not us. The state runs this process in a way that is unfathomable and resists all audits. For 2 audits in a row over a period of 5 years, the state has said, we don't have enough resources to assess all the properties in the state. Fortunately, Office of Legislative Oversight and the County Council just did a study, and they found that 69% of the properties in our county are not assessed correctly. That includes houses that have had improvements and those that haven't. And I'm just talking about residential. I want to be clear about this. There are other audits, one that just came out at the state level, where the State Office of Legislative Audits found that the State Department of Assessment and Taxations was only doing 41% of all the assessments they were assigned to do. Phenomenal number. Let me turn to the increase that took place 2 years ago. And this was voted in the spring of 16. The 9% property tax increase. Many of you don't know what happened to that money. I'm going to tell you what we were able to reconstruct from the reconciliation process. Out of the $90 million, $35 million went to the schools. And the schools were to use that money largely to decrease average class size. It was spent also on curriculum changes and staff development. However, the achievement gap, according to our data, actually shrunk in grew, in math and stayed even in literacy in fiscal 17. The rest of the money,
Yeah, there we go. Yes, the rest of the revenues, you mean?
But the rest of the $90 million went to two things. One was improvements to the county office building, and the other was for grants and contracts for services.
You want me to go back? It takes a second to go back because the
There
two
it is.
slides.
There it is. Okay.
It's right there.
All right, I think I've covered all the rest of the points on property tax. Let's turn to recordation and energy
Now
tax.
Go back to here. There we go.
Recordation taxes are dropping, largely because boomers don't want to move. Although, Alex, you may have some more in-depth analysis of why recordation taxes are down. But basically, home sales are off of projection. And the energy tax. Now, this may not be a problem this year, but it was a problem last year. It was a warm winter, so energy taxes were down.
Yeah, it's very seasonal and, prone to fluctuations depending on, the weather, but also, policy interactions related to energy efficiency. And on recordation tax, I would say that, that is very much tied to the housing market, which is notoriously very volatile. That's going to go up and down depending on the housing market. And we're dealing with, in the scheme of things, relatively small fluctuations overall in terms of that revenue source. And with respect to recordation tax especially, we're especially prone to very high value properties on the commercial sector. A very small portion of the total revenue is due, a very large portion of the total revenue is due to a very small number of transactions in the commercial sector. And of course, the commercial sector is very much tied to the general economy and what's going on. So that's going to move up and down pretty significantly.
Okay.
I guess I'm a little confused about, I think you may misunderstand the nature of revenue projections. I mean, the methodology that is used by our economists to do those projections are the most sophisticated methodologies that we know of. If you have better methodologies that you think would provide more accurate revenue projections, we are happy to hear about
Thank you
them.
for that question.
But let me finish. But the criticisms that you're making are on revenue sources that are, by their nature, very volatile.
We agree.
And
We would like to see greater reserves placed on spending as a result of that volatility. We think we have some experience over the last few years about how poor our forecasts are. We'd like to see greater reserves. That's standard operating
Well, we
procedure.
are increasing.
We want to see a greater increase
To what?
in the reserves that are set aside.
Oh, that's what we're doing. Every year, we're increasing the number.
Apparently not enough, because we've had surprises that have required savings plans 2 years in a row.
Well, that's to keep the,
No, it's not 2 years.
but that hasn't meant that we were going, dipping deep into the barrel.
We haven't gone.
The year that was an issue was 2010, where, the recession hit everybody hugely, but not since.
All right, let's talk about the solution.
All right, yeah, we'll be on track this time, Gordy. There we go.
Okay.
It was just one slide, folks.
The solution that was presented by the executive in this budget, we feel was incomplete, increased more spending, and didn't offer any new revenue controls. When the projection was made last fall, it called for an 11.7% spending decrease. Only $53 million in reductions were approved as part of the savings plan for the current year. No savings plans that we could find in the budget were spelled out for the coming fiscal year. Any comment on that?
Yeah.
That's the budget.
A couple of things. First of all, the FY18 savings plan that you talk about, the 53 million, remember that started 7/12 of the way through the year. Right. So if you annualize it, it's actually $100 million reduction in FY18. Okay. So that was the starting point for at least the executive branch departments in terms of what we were looking at. The savings plan, actually, as I said before in my presentation, every department in the executive branch was asked to pony up a reduction. The public safety departments ended up with about a 3% reduction, and the non-public safety was 4.5%. So that was the starting point. Now, the executive makes some adjustments up and down based on his priorities and based on the needs of the community, but that was the starting point for discussion. And in fact, a lot of those reductions, much to the chagrin of the department heads, were taken.
We understand, but as presented, the 2019 budget represents a 2% increase, does it not?
Okay, I have to pose a question to you. What is the problem that you're solving? The council, I will say, and I'm sure the executive feels the same way, we are very concerned that our residents and taxpayers feel like they're getting value for their money. We recognize that we ask everybody to pay a significant amount. Fees, property taxes, income taxes, water quality protection charge, you name it. We ask you to pay a lot. The council, I think, and the executive is acutely aware of it. Now, what we could do is not spend any money and save it and save it and save it for some unexpected catastrophe. And as it is, we're getting towards the 10% reserve goal, which at this point, how much do we have in reserves, Alex? Do you remember? Like as of today?
It'll be over $400 million.
$400 million we have sitting there. Sitting there. How much do we have in OPEB, which is the obligation for employee health benefits? I think it's nearly $1 billion.
It's close to $1 billion.
Close to $1 billion. Sitting there. Sitting there. It's not paving your roads, it's not educating your kids, it's not planting your trees, it's not saving the climate, it's not building housing. It's sitting there because we are incredibly conservative. And I will give Ike points for this. He is a very fiscally conservative person. Now you can pick at these little things, which I would say are out of scale and not completely accurate, but I'm not in a position to argue with it all because don't have it in the top of my head. But overall, the amount of money that Montgomery County puts aside to pay for unexpected things, for projected obligations, is probably more than most jurisdictions do in the country. We are very fiscally conservative, which is why Wall Street likes us. And why we are a place that people want to invest in. But we are very careful with putting money to one side. And the council gets concerned, are we really doing enough for the kids? Are we really doing enough for this and that, the other thing? Because you pay you write a big check on a regular basis. And we really value that and respect our obligation to make sure that you feel that we are serving your needs. So, please, Gordy,
Let's turn to the next.
you need to think of the big picture.
So there was a press release when the budget was announced on March 15th, in which I noted that he had reduced the contribution to the retirement trust funds by $21 million for the coming fiscal year in order to make room for more spending increases. Did we get that wrong or right?
Well, I think it's not entirely accurate. That's referring to the FY18 contributions towards OPEB. And the recommendation embedded within the executive's budget is that the retiree claims, a portion of them will be paid for using trust assets. Which is what their intent. They're set aside, invested long term. That's what the point of having those dollars is. The $21 million refers to the over $130 million that was budgeted as part of the FY18 budget towards pre-funding, that is to set aside for long-term investing. A small portion of that was reduced in order to build up reserves. As we mentioned earlier, our